All right, joining me now here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show are G1, Rod Stars, and DJ Illinois from the Bronx-based hip-hop group Rebel Diaz. You can find them at rebeldiaz.com. Guys, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having us.
All right, cool. So, guys, we're going to talk about your music, but first, some people may not know that Rebel Diaz is not just a hip-hop group. You guys are also the founders of something called the Rebel Diaz Art Collective, which was recently violently evicted from your South Bronx art space. Before we get to the raid itself, tell us about what exactly is the collective and what was the space that was there?
Well, the Rebel Diaz Arts Collective, known here in the neighborhood as the RDAC, or the RDACBX, for the acronym, is basically a community-led initiative which started in 2008, which was a response to being a bit disillusioned with the nonprofit industry, with the concept of, rich people from foundations funding social justice work. Kind of didn't really make a lot of sense. And we also felt that it was necessary to really have something that was for the community and by the community. A lot of times in social movements, we get this, I think, false concept of poor people being saved by this messiah or by this, the idea that, we're going to go and save poor people or empower, poor communities. And we thought that there was already power here in the South Bronx. There's already power in poor communities, and we thought that it was needed to really, really have a community-led initiative. So that was really the energy behind the RDACBX in the beginning, was to organize locally. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of times even ourselves as musicians or as activists, we were kind of getting tired of just preaching to the choir or tired of like the social movement kind of just being a social thing and not really doing organizing. You know what I'm saying? That organizing was more than just a protest. But within the context of where we're at, we're in the birthplace of hip-hop, we're a hip-hop group, we thought that it was important to have a hip-hop community space. So with the community from Hunts Point, which is where I live, we started organizing, at the barbershops, at the basketball courts, watching football games with the homies from the block and really building trust, building relationships that were real, that weren't just based on buy my, activist newspaper and put on a Che Guevara shirt. You know what I'm saying? Like It was like real work and building real relationships. So that's kind of the energy behind the RDACBX. But the physical space that I say was an abandoned candy factory, and I'll let G1 talk about it because he really was a big part of that initiative of getting into the abandoned candy factory. Rehabilitating it, fixing it up, and turning it into a beautiful 5,000 square foot autonomous hip hop community space. So I'll hand it out to G, and he'll take it from there.
Yeah. So for 4.5 years, we were in this abandoned space. Like Rod said, it really started with the energy of really trying to create an autonomous alternative. And we did that by going into this abandoned space in the South Bronx. As you may know, there's a lot of abandoned spaces and factories still in the South Bronx. And we went in there and we transformed what was a super dirty, disorganized space and turned it into a 5,000 square foot community center. We had a performance space, a recording studio. We had the Nuestra America Media Center, which was a media center that was funded in part with the support of the Bolivarian Revolution from the people of Venezuela through the Venezuelan oil company subsidiary Citgo here in the United States. So we received support from them also to start this media center where we taught young people how to look at mass media critically and provided them the tools and the context to be able to create alternative community media, be it graphic design, music, video. We also had a recording studio in the space. So it was really, the idea was to create infrastructure for the community, particularly young people in the area, to be able to create alternative culture and to be able to have a safe space to gather at. We know that in the Bronx, too often the after-school activity for young people is being stopped and frisked by by the NYPD.
Right.
And so for us, we felt that in our context, the most revolutionary thing we could do in the moment was to create a safe space for young people to gather at and be able to build their self-identity and self-esteem, culture in the arts and media.
And you guys did it. You guys had this. You guys built from the ground up this amazing. And I've seen video. I've never been there, but I've seen video and photos from it. It was gorgeous. It was just the most, a badass, amazing place for people to go, for people in the community to go. And then eventually, and then you've gotten classes there. You have state of the art equipment for young kids to actually learn and use and learn things about how to be how to become an artist. And then eventually, though, the landlord of the place decides that he doesn't want you there anymore. So what happened at that point?
So at that point, when we went in there, fixed it up, added value to the space by fixing the plumbing, putting in toilets, putting electricity in different parts of the of the building, the landlord didn't have a problem with us. You know what I mean? If anything, we're adding value to this building, right? So 3.5 years passed, and I want to say this too. From the beginning, we were putting up murals. And I want to differentiate, we were putting up beautiful graffiti murals, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it wasn't, just like, graffiti. And I love hip-hop culture. I love graffiti, and I respect the rebelliousness of bombing. But it was, we were putting up murals. It wasn't just like tags that we were throwing up, you know what I'm saying? However, he didn't have a problem with that in the beginning either, you know what I'm saying? But a thing called gentrification is going on in the Bronx. And it's a rapidly accelerating and violent gentrification. And I say that because, a block away from where our community center is at, they are starting to build a 16-story condominium with one-bedroom apartments starting between $1,200 and $1,300,
wow.
Which is insane when you think about the median income in the area being about $13,000 a year. You know what I mean? So what happens is that I think that the building owner, and I say building owner when he's really a landowner because he owns the whole block, right? I think starts realizing that what we're paying and what he could be getting probably double or triple that. You know what I'm saying? And the relationship basically starts going downhill because this guy stops communicating. And last November, when our lease was up, he attempted to give us a 100% increase in our rent. He basically tried to raise our rent about $1,000. You know what I mean? When the original agreement was for the rent to go up $100, which is reasonable. You get a new lease, it's going to go up a little bit, but not $1,000. He understood that we were a community space, that we had programming, that we had summer youth employment, that we have monthly, events. So for a community space, any type of community space, you can't be working off of not having a lease. You know what I mean? So we're negotiating with the dude, trying to figure out what the deal is with the lease. January of this year, 2 months after, he doesn't, he refuses to give us the price we agreed on. He tells us, I am a commercial businessman. I have zero interest in having a relationship with the community, let alone a community organization. I want you out of my building. He stopped receiving our rent money. We tried to pay him rent. It wasn't about us not having the money. Like I said, we received grant money. We fundraised at the space. And he did not want to take the money. And he was very open and blatant about saying, I want you out of my building. At one point, I feel like he even tried to offer us money to get out of the building. But, being a businessman, and I think a lot of these businessmen are con men at the same time, he kept having communication with us. You know what I mean? He was like, oh, well, let's figure it out, Long story short, we were a bit blindsided by this eviction. And I said blindsided, and that we never, we had just talked to him a week before, and he was still trying to figure out a situation with us about how we were going to solve it. So definitely, we see this as a clear case of displacement. The day after we were evicted, he already had his spot rented out.
Wow.
He moved quick. And, there's also an aspect that we want to call, this is real clear, the criminalization of hip-hop culture. This guy saw us as young folks. He saw that there was art. I mean, there's the typical there are artists that are part of gentrification that a lot of times accelerate that process. That's not the art that we were doing. We weren't doing art for art's sake. You know what I mean? We were doing art that involved the community, that dealt with community issues. Our murals were political. You know what I'm saying? So I think that, you know, he viewed us from the perspective of a rich old white man. You know what I'm saying? And his